The Adventures of the Beverly Hillbillies. The bright sun of California shone down on the grand mansion of the Clampett family, but inside, life remained as simple and rustic as it had been in the hills of Missouri. Jed Clampett, the tall and wise patriarch of the clan, stood in the kitchen watching his young nephew Jethro and his daughter Ellie Mae. There was a peculiar sense of industry in the air today. Jethro was holding a small, furry creature with great care, moving it along the surfaces of the wooden cabinets. Jed looked at his nephew and spoke with a calm curiosity. He asked if that was Paul. Ellie Mae looked up with a bright smile and corrected him, saying that it was Elmer. She explained that Elmer liked to scurry around inside the cabinets where it was dusty. Jed watched as the little raccoon flicked its tail, gathering bits of dust with every movement. He asked Elmer how it was going. Ellie Mae remarked that he was a handy little critter. Jed nodded in agreement, noting that raccoon fur was better than feathers for picking up lint. He observed that the animal seemed right proud to be happy and concluded that Elmer was a dandy little duster. Jed suggested they take their dusters outside to shake them out. Once that was done, he told Ellie Mae she could take hers upstairs to clean the dresser drawers in the closet. As they prepared to work, Jethro looked at his uncle with a serious expression. He reminded Uncle Jed that old Honest John had never come back to pick up his $700,000. Jethro asked if he could have that money as an advance against his allowance. Jed looked at the boy and reminded him that his allowance was only 50 cents a week, and it would take a very long time to pay back such a vast sum. Jethro insisted he was young, but Jed countered that he was not that young. Furthermore, Jed explained that Honest John needed that money to help fight the problem of smog in the air. Jethro felt a surge of inspiration. He declared that he would like to throw his brain into the fight against smog, calling it a dandy cause. He had heard that it took both brains and money to whip the problem. Jed smiled, thinking that if those were the requirements, they were well prepared. He reckoned they had a leg up on the situation. Ellie Mae gathered Elmer and headed upstairs to get busy with the cleaning. Just then, Granny entered the room with a look of concern. She reminded Jed that Mr. Drysdale had called. The banker had said he was coming by to pick up the money. Jed asked why he would do such a thing. Granny explained that the banker believed folks had no business keeping $700,000 in cash around the house. In fact, Mr. Drysdale was so worried that he had developed hives. Jed expressed sympathy for the hives but remained firm. He had promised that money to Honest John to fight smog. Granny told him that the banker insisted the money belonged back in the vault at the bank. Jed shook his head, stating that a promise was a promise. Jethro chimed in again, repeating his vow to fight smog. Granny asked him how he planned to do that. Jethro admitted he did not know yet, but since Uncle Jed said it took brains and money, they were set. Granny asked if Jethro had any money. Jethro replied that he did not, as he was supplying the brains. He pointed to his head, claiming that sitting between his sideburns was a real brute of a brain. Granny was not impressed, suggesting the only brute Jethro had was at the end of his gutter. Jed encouraged them to support the boy, but Granny argued that Jethro did not know smog from applesauce. Jethro defended himself, saying he listened to the weather reports all the time. He mentioned that the report predicted light eye irritation for the day, but he was not worried because he had dark eyes. Meanwhile, at the Commerce Bank, Mr. Drysdale was in a state of high agitation. He was dressed in a stern manner, pacing before his loyal secretary, Jane Hathaway. He ordered a guard to go to the Clampett house and get the money, telling them not to take no for an answer. However, the person in the guard uniform was actually Miss Jane. She complained that he had forced her to wear the uniform to save money on a Real Guard, but she feared Mr. Clampett would recognize her. Mr. Drysdale had a solution. He produced a disguise for her to wear. He told her to use her gun if Mr. Clampett refused to hand over the money. Miss Jane was horrified, but the banker insisted she just fire a couple of shots over Jed's head to show she meant business. She refused, telling him that if he wanted the money, he should get it himself. Mr. Drysdale called her a disgrace to the uniform. Back at the mansion, the banker and his disguised secretary arrived. Mr. Drysdale announced that the guard was there for the $700,000. Jed stated he did not think he could let it go. The banker whispered to Jed not to cross the guard, claiming the person was a mad dog killer. Jed was skeptical and asked the guard if she was indeed a mad dog killer. Miss Jane quickly dropped the act and asked what she was doing in the uniform. Mr. Drysdale tried to play it off as a practical joke, but Miss Jane was not amused. To punish her, the banker told Jed that she should be made to carry the heavy bag of money out. Jed stepped in, saying he would not let her tote the money out. Jethro was sitting on the bag of money, looking thoughtful. He told Mr. Drysdale that he was going to sit there until he thought of a way to get rid of the smog. The banker told him that smog was a problem for a genius to solve. Jethro thanked him for the compliment and said he was working on it. Mr. Drysdale suggested Jethro go to the kitchen to eat, but the boy refused to eat until he figured out a way to whip the smog. The banker grew frustrated, telling him to get off the money because an armed guard might shoot him. Jethro looked at Miss Jane and noted she looked just like the secretary. Miss Jane confirmed she was herself. Eventually, Mr. Drysdale realized he was getting nowhere and decided they might as well go back to the office. Jethro asked Miss Jane to stay and help him think of a brilliant idea. He was worried he might starve to death before the problem was solved. Miss Jane explained that the smog problem would likely not be solved until someone invented a replacement for the internal combustion engine. Jethro asked what that was, and she explained it was the engine that powered automobiles. She mentioned that people hoped to convert to steam or electricity. Jethro's eyes lit up. He asked if he should work on a steam car or an electric car. Mr. Drysdale sarcastically suggested a gas turbine, but Jethro said he would not mess with hats, only cars. Jed remained firm that the money was staying at the house. Mr. Drysdale tried to argue it was his money, but Jed pointed out it was his own. The banker claimed the sack belonged to him. Jed offered to dump the money out so the banker could have his sack back. Mr. Drysdale suggested dumping it into the truck out front. Jed refused, saying it was not safe. Miss Jane, still in her guard uniform, eventually drew her weapon at the banker's command, but she could not bring herself to be a traitor to the Clampetts. Jed then shared his plan. He had promised the money to a fellow who wanted to drill a tunnel through the mountains, put in a great big fan, and draw all the smog out of the city. Mr. Drysdale called it a preposterous idea, but Jed and his family liked it. Miss Jane explained that the problem of smog was too big to be handled locally and needed to be solved on a national level by the president. She told Jed that $700,000 was just a drop in the bucket compared to the millions or billions needed. Jed began to study on this. He wondered how much the president really needed. Mr. Drysdale, sensing an opportunity, told Jed he would take the money back to the bank for safekeeping while they figured it out. He then turned his frustration on Miss Jane, dishonorably discharging her as a guard and reducing her back to the rank of secretary. He warned her not to expect a Christmas bonus, though she noted she had never received one anyway. Suddenly, a loud noise came from outside. Jethro appeared with the family truck, which was billowing clouds of white vapor. Jethro announced that he had converted the rascal to steam. He claimed it was the Jethro Bodine steam car, the answer to air pollution. However, the steam was so thick it began to choke everyone. Jed decided they should go back inside. Jethro realized that if he had whipped the smog problem with his clean engine, the money could be used to mass-produce his invention. But Jed reminded him that according to the banker, only the president could handle the problem. Jethro decided that he would drive his steam car to Washington, pull up in front of the White House, and give the president both the brains and the money in one package. Jed pointed out that the money they had was still just a drop in the bucket. He mentioned that the president might need millions or even billions. Granny suggested they give the president all of their money. Jed agreed and decided to stop by the bank to get the rest of it. Ellie Mae and Granny both insisted on going along. Jed thought it would be a fine trip for the whole family. He even decided to leave a note for the milkman to let him know they were going to Washington. At the bank, Mr. Drysdale was in a panic. He was writing a letter to his own brother to repossess a car when Jed walked in. Jed told the banker that he had studied on the matter and decided to let the president fight the smog. He told a cashier that he had about $95 million in the bank and wanted to take it all to Washington. Mr. Drysdale was horrified, knowing that if the Clampetts withdrew their money, the bank would be ruined. He tried to think of a way to stop them, mentioning red tape and Secret Service clearances. In a desperate move, Mr. Drysdale hired a talented impressionist named Rich Little. He wanted the man to pretend to be the president on the telephone to convince the Clampetts to keep their money in the bank. Rich Little arrived and began practicing his voices. He did a perfect impression of the president. The banker was impressed and set the plan in motion. Back at the mansion, the phone rang. Ellie Mae answered and told Jed that the president was calling all the way from Washington. Jed took the phone, feeling very honored. Rich Little, sounding exactly like the leader of the country, thanked Jed for his patriotic offer. Jed told the president he was welcome to the $95 million and that the whole family was coming to deliver it. He even introduced Granny and Ellie Mae over the phone. Granny offered to bring pickled pawpaws and hand-slung chicken, while Ellie Mae offered a baby possum. The man on the phone quickly told them not to come to Washington, claiming there were enough people like them there already. He instructed Jed to leave the money in the Commerce Bank of Beverly Hills where it would draw maximum interest under the care of the wise Mr. Drysdale. Jed promised to do whatever the president said. After the call, the family was a bit disappointed that they would not be traveling, but they were happy to follow orders. Rich Little finished his performance at the bank. Mr. Drysdale was relieved and grateful. He offered to pay the performer's fee, which was $3,750. As Rich Little was leaving, Miss Jane recognized him and asked for his John Wayne and Ed Sullivan impressions. He happily obliged, much to her delight. Back at the house, Jethro came running in with a new message. He said a man in a white coat, whom he believed was a secret government agent disguised as a milkman, had brought a message from the president. The message said they were to go to Washington after all. Jed was confused but excited. He decided they should pack their bags immediately. Jethro asked if he should convert the car back to steam, but Jed thought they should fly so as not to keep the president waiting. The family began to prepare for their grand journey. They were filled with excitement and a sense of duty. As they boarded their flight, they spoke to the flight attendants about their mission to give $95 million to the president. They carried their rustic gifts of food and animals, ready to face the nation's capital with the same simple honesty they brought to everything in life. It was a journey born of a desire to do good, led by a family with hearts as big as their fortune, proving that even in the big city, the values of the hills would always shine through. The story of the Clampetts and their trip to see the president became a legend in their own time. It was a tale of misunderstanding, laughter, and pure intention. As the plane rose into the sky, leaving the smog of the city behind, Jed looked out the window and smiled, knowing that as long as they were together, they were exactly where they needed to be.